Hackett is an English guitarist, songwriter, composer, and producer. He was lead guitarist of the very well-known band Genesis from 1971 to 1977, in which time he was involved in 6 studio albums and 3 live albums. His first solo album was Voyage of the Acolyte, which was released in 1975, but that was whilst he was still part of Genesis. After he left Genesis, he released more solo albums. In 1985, he co-founded a band called GTR with Steve Howe, who was an ex-guitarist of Yes, and they had 2 years and 1 album. And he's been solo since then. In total, he has released 28 studio albums in various styles, including classical. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is a review of a new release album. I'm just going to pause here and explain that I do some new release reviews. Most of the reviews on my channel are of a long list of albums claimed to be the 3,000 greatest albums of all time, according to an amalgamated critics list created at Claimed Music, which is a website. But I step off that list occasionally, and one of those reasons I do that is to review things that I think might be interesting as new releases. I pass over a lot of new releases, but there are some that catch my eye, and this is one. So it's Steve Hackett, who was in Genesis, and I know of some others of his stuff. I'm not a huge, don't have a huge knowledge of it, but I thought I'd give this one a go. And it's his 28th solo album, and it was released. Let me check the date. 6 days ago. Okay, so I'm fairly hot off the press here, I think. So Steve Hackett never had the recognition that Genesis had, and some of the other ex-members of Genesis, like, of course, Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins. Um, so we're definitely in prog rock territory here. It's a concept album. Apparently, it's the story of a character called Travla, Travla, and also apparently it's somewhat autobiographical. I had to do some digging to find out information about the album because there is not as yet a Wikipedia page about it, which is usually my go-to source for everything. Um, so yeah, as I said, a very definite modern prog stuff. This is an area that I know pretty well. I've listened to quite a lot of stuff in this. And so, apologies if I am going to do a lot of name checking of other bands and people here. Just because I this is stuff that I'm kind of more involved in. It's grandiose, it's multi-styled, so there's lots of different textures and styles and things going on. It's long, evolving tracks. Not all of them are long, actually, but they're evolving and they're interconnected, and it's got this feeling of, it's actually got a feeling of being almost micromanaged. And you've got this section, short section, which transitions into this next section, which transitions into the next one, and it's like as if they've kind of recorded each one separately, but worked really hard on those transitions, and it's quite possible that that's what they've done. There's a dazzling array of instruments and styles here. Styles include, obviously, there's quite a bit that you'd classify as rock. There's jazz, there's classical, there's chorus, there's kind of circusy style stuff, and there's lots of things in between. There's one that's got a kind of almost kind of Arabic feel to it. And also, particularly, there's an emphasis on classical guitar at points. So this is, I know, one of Steve Hackett's things is classical guitar as well as rock guitar. There are some production tricks on this album that I don't think I've heard before, especially in the first track and the introduction to the first track, but coming later. So in the first track, there's kind of sound effects and stuff. Yeah, I should have said sound effects, but it is prog rock. But there's times when they morph into being part of the music, and that morphing texture is really interesting. There was another bit that I heard when there was a synth that had a very fast kind of stabby tremolo on it, like that. I can't do it fast enough. And somehow that was also applied to the vocals at the same time, so they're kind of getting the same effect across different things to make it feel more integrated. So there's there's some interesting stuff kind of from the technical point of view going on here. Musically, it's actually, apart from the fact that it's um, got this kind of grandiose prog stuff. Actually, it's not challenging in terms of the musical stuff. It's not as way out as stuff like late '70s King Crimson. Um, there's, as I said, quite a few musicians involved. I did manage to find a list of some of them, and there were two that jumped out at me. There's two Swedish names that I knew on this list. So the first is the bassist Jonas Reingold, who I've actually already featured as one of my own picks on this channel. Car Mechanic album called Dot, and Jonas Reingold was the creative mind behind that. But he's been in a load of the European prog stuff that's been around. The Flower Kings, The Tangent, Transatlantic. He's worked with Nad Sylvan, Agents of Mercy, The Sea Within, and these are all names that may mean nothing to you, but um, there's some great albums out there by these people. And then I mentioned Nad Sylvan. Actually, Nad Sylvan's doing the vocals on this album, and he's a bit of a go-to prog vocalist. Has been for the last kind of 15 years or so, I would say. And he's Swedish, but he's just got a little bit of edge on the accent there, but not a huge amount. And he is a strong vocalist, I would say. There's lots of guitar focus on the album. Again, given that Steve's a guitarist primarily, there's no surprise here. There's definitely rock guitar a lot of the time, although, as I said, he does throw some classical guitar in there. So electric guitar. And there were bits where it reminded me of other guitarists. So again, I'm going to do name checking here. So there were bits that I guess the most obvious one where it sounded like there were not a great deal, but a little bit that sounded like quite like Brian May from Queen. There were bits that sounded like Dave Gilmour's late Pink Floyd stuff, and there were more bits that reminded me of Jeff Beck's era when he did a thing called Guitar Shop, and he kind of making very mechanical sounds, like almost machine-like sounds with the guitar, and there were bits like that, and lots of other sounds as well. And that's not to say that I think his guitar work's derivative. I think it just means it's versatile, and I recognised a few kind of maybe there were influences on him in that. So it follows a kind of formula that seems to have come out from prog rock in the last 30 odd years, which is what's sometimes called the third wave of prog. So definitely has a feel like stuff like the Flower Kings and lots of other things that have been mentioned. That I have said before, and other people have said that there's in some ways putting the title progressive on this music is wrong because it's not that progressive with a small p in that it doesn't move music on, it doesn't push the boundaries. It uses a whole load of things from the 70s prog rock, and it's updated a lot of it. But there does seem to be a kind of formula for this now. But it kind of sits beside those other things, but with the kind of uniqueness here is the particular emphasis on the rock guitar and then also the use of more classical stuff. It'll come as no surprise for people who are regular watchers of my videos that I love it. It's a great prog album. I do like a lot of prog. There's a lot to get into. The only problem with good modern prog albums is there's so many of them to pick from. But if you just pick this album up on its own, I would say don't be put off by the fact that I'm using the word prog a lot. It's grand, but it's not inaccessible. And it's easy to get immersed here. There's a kind of big feel of the story going on. I couldn't tell you what the story is, but it definitely has that almost symphonic kind of scope to it. So I love it, of course. And as always, I'd love to invite your comments on this album and on the review as well, if you like. And that's what the comments box is for. So please do talk to me. That's it from me for now.